destroy what they own and destroy the lives for their grandchildren. They know that as human beings, but in their institutional role as CEOs, they have to dismiss this as what's called an externality in economic theory. It's something you put aside because it doesn't have to do with making the best market transactions. Well, in this case, the externality happens to be the fate of the species, but it's still an institutional requirement. To overcome that is no small task. That means really reconstructing institutional structures in a large-scale way. And the limited market, it's a very limited market that we have, kind of compels those highly destructive decisions. I mean, it's the same in financial markets. So there's what's called systemic risk. You know, if Goldman Sachs, they make some transaction, if they're playing the game by the rules, and they have to, or else, you know, their guys are out, they carry out a transaction in such a way that it benefits them. And if it's a risk, they, you know, insure themselves against that risk. But they don't consider the effect on the rest of the financial system, what's called systemic risk. That's an externality. They ignore it. And it's built into the system that they must ignore it, even though it's understood that this is, you know, brings about repeated financial crises, worse and worse. Of course, that can be overcome by government regulation. From the Depression until the 1970s, when deregulation started and financialization of the economy began, during that whole period there were no financial crises because the regulatory structure of the New Deal was sufficient to constrain it, plus the whole way the financial system was organized. But since the 70s, there have been repeated crises getting worse and worse. We're probably building up for the next one right now. Again, this externality is not accounted for. Well, in the case of systemic risk, there's at least an answer. The government can regulate sufficiently to overcome this serious market defect. In the case of the environment, nobody's going to do it unless God steps in. There's no one to control the externalities, the fate of the species. But that's what we're faced with. So it takes real work to try to do something about this. And how much time there is, we don't know. I mean, what we do know is the longer it's delayed, the worse it's going to be. How bad it'll be, you can just guess.
Barack Obama promised to close Guantanamo within a year of becoming president. He hasn't done so, and there doesn't seem to be any indication that he will. So I was wondering if you could address, one, whether we understand his political and legal reasons for not doing so, and whether you yourself see a type of solution, because it seems like the claim is that there is no solution.
Well, there's a solution, you can close it. But actually the whole Guantanamo case is kind of interesting. What right do we have to be in Guantanamo altogether? I mean, Guantanamo was stolen from Cuba at gunpoint. In 1902, the U.S. invaded Cuba to prevent it from liberating itself from Spain. In the history books here, it says we invaded to liberate them, but that's not what happened. Scholarship has wiped that out. We invaded to prevent them from liberating themselves from Spain. Among other things, we, at gunpoint, passed an amendment which required them to hand us Guantanamo, the main port and the eastern part of the island. And Guantanamo, there's a treaty with Cuba that they want to get out of, but we won't let them, which does have conditions on the use of Guantanamo. It's supposed to be a coaling station. There's nothing in that treaty that says you can use it to store Haitian refugees that you don't want, as was being done for a long time. There's nothing in it that says you can use it as a torture chamber. So, first of all, it's stolen at gunpoint by a completely illegitimate treaty, and it's being used in violation of that treaty. Furthermore, the fact that it's a torture chamber was obvious at the beginning. I mean, I can't understand why anyone was surprised when the torture memos came out. I mean, why have interrogation carried out in Guantanamo instead of in a prison in New York? Well, there's only one reason. You can claim that American law doesn't apply. There's no other reason for it. So of course it was going to be a torture chamber, and it is. Now, it's not the only one. The Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan is probably worse. And if you look at the legal record, the Supreme Court did pass a decision, make a decision that overturned the Bush administration effort and claimed that, and ruled that prisoners in Guantanamo have habeas corpus rights. The Bush administration tried to restrict that, to say, well, it just applies to Guantanamo, not to other interrogation centers like Bagram. But the district courts, in fact, a Bush appointee in the district court ruled that it applies everywhere. Okay, the Obama Justice Department is now trying to overturn that. They're trying to outflank Bush from the right on torture and try to get the courts to decide that it doesn't apply to, say, Bagram, which means, as Glenn Greenwald pointed out in a blog, that what that means is that if the United States captures somebody, say, in Yemen, and decides it wants to torture them, they can't send them to Guantanamo to be tortured, but they can send them to Bagram. Big difference, you know. Well, that's Obama. You know, on the legal issues, it's not much of a record. There's a few things that are improvements over Bush, but not on the main ones. And this is an example. But there's no problem about Guantanamo. It can just be closed. Why should the United States be running torture chambers?
Where do the detainees go?
What?
Where do the detainees go if you close it?
Where do the detainees go if we close Guantanamo?
Either you bring them to court and try them, and if they're guilty, in a fair trial, sentence them, or else you free them. I mean,
their countries won't take them back.
What?
Their countries won't take them back, so where do you send them?
If their countries don't take them back, we should provide refuge for them. But that's what criminal trials are. I suppose you're arrested for something. You're not supposed to be tortured. You're supposed to be brought to trial, and if there's a charge against you, okay, the government tries to present it, and if you're freed, you're freed.
I think the whole point is that there are no charges against them.
Well, that's the problem. They don't have credible charges against them. If they did, they could bring them to trial. That's why Obama is in favor of military commissions, which don't have anything like the guarantees of fair trials. I mean, there's a claim, well, we're at war, and they're prisoners of war, or something like that. But, you know, that kind of a claim, anybody could make about anything.
Are we out of time, Sarah? Yes. So there are 3 commercials before we end. Noam's book is outside for sale, and it's called, it has an optimistic title, actually. What is the title? Tell me the title of your book. Hopes and Prospects. That sounds good. So I think everyone should buy a copy. We have 2 more weeks of prophecy, and please tell your friends. We're not yet sold out. We would like to be very much. Thanks to Peace Action for creating with us this evening and this benefit. And they would like to say, and I would like to say, of course, that we should all take peace action in our lives and do whatever we can to change things. So thank you very much. Thank you, Noam.